Hello everyone. So welcome to this Kubernetes setup. What I have done is that I have created a GitHub repository, so where you will find everything which I'm going to share with you. So you can see that I have got a CKA setup GitHub repo under my name. So if you go into that one, you'll find that there is a nice little documentation I have mentioned. So this is where you can actually look into it, and then you basically will be able to um, follow the step by step. Now, what I am planning to do is that I'm planning to create a couple of things, and I have chosen Azure as my infrastructure deployment place. So let me try to draw something on the board. Okay, so imagine that I have my Azure subscription, and inside that Azure subscription, I basically need a couple of virtual machines, and they should be connected in using some network. So let's try to draw that. Now, this is my Azure subscription, where this is the network boundary I'm using. So this is my virtual network, okay, in Azure. And then within that virtual network, I need a couple of machines. One is a controller machine, maybe two worker machine. Okay, so you can call it as W1, W0, worker 0, worker 1, and this is your controller. Okay, so this is where you put your backend Kubernetes. And then in the same network, I create some client machine. This basically connects to this controller and also has a public IP address, okay, through which I will log into this client machine and then reach out to the controller and then deploy pods to the worker nodes. Now, while we do that, we also have defined some address space. So for example, this network, I have said that it'll be 10.0.0 dot something, okay? And then we give that CIDR notification, and then probably one of the VM will get 10.230.0.20, and this might get 10.230.0.21. This might get 10.230.0.10. Okay. And then obviously client machine will have some IP address assigned, which we are not worried about, which we need mainly this public IP address to reach out to that. That's the fair, simple setup. And I have a script to do that. So you don't have to do anything uh, at all in terms of deploying this. So let's see how this script looks like. Now, first thing first, you need an Azure subscription, and you should be able to log into that subscription. Let's check it out. Okay, so we go to this Azure, and we can use Azure CLI, that's a command line interface, to deploy anything. So just to check if I am logged in, I just try this AZ command to check the Azure command is running, and then say AZ VM list. If I run and then something comes up, that means I'm logged in. So I'm good to go. Now, what I essentially need is a script to deploy all these resources. So if you see over here in this, you basically get a couple of things. So let me go into that and go on top of this page where I have put my documentation, and it has a nice little, let's say, view of how that would look like and exactly what we have discussed. And I have also given a script. So you click on the script, it takes you to the script portal, and then you see over here, you have got something like script. So let me open this up in a raw, okay, and then walk you through the step by step how this looks like, okay. So let me download that. Wget url -o and then say setup azure.sh. If you do that, then you will have that script available with you in the local machine. Now that's the script which looks like. Now what I'm doing is that you notice here I am doing a location. So I have a couple of variables. Location is where I am going to create my resources, and the resource group name also is given. Storage account name I can give CKA2 storage account. I can probably add some different thing because storage account has to be unique across all Azure subscriptions. So you have that image. So I'm using Ubuntu LTS. So whatever that image means in my Azure subscription will come over here. And I'm also making sure that the virtual machines are shut down on time. So they're not up and running because it's not a production, just testing environment. If it is production, should be up and running all the time. You should not use this shutdown, auto shutdown option. But I'm enabling auto shutdown option to save some cost in this environment so that I can use it for longer period of time. Then I given the name for the virtual network like CKA VNet, and then I have also given the name for the subnet, that is CKA subnet, and the NSG is the NSG for CKA control plane. And then I am using the virtual network address prefix that's 10.230.24. Okay. And then subnet address prefix is 10.230.27. So if you just type it out in the search engine, you will see what are the ranges it will give you. So no confusion on that part. So you can check it out if you need to check. Now, one of the things is that if we are choosing a size called standard underscore DS1. You can choose any size if you prefer. This size will be the size of my all my virtual machines. So I'm not going to hard code this size again and again for every virtual machine creation. So rather I put that in a thing. So you can have different size in controller, different size for worker node. So I'm just using one just to demonstrate the thing. And then controller VM will have an IP address that is 10.230.0.10 because I'm using this VNet prefix. And the first VM which I'm going to generate will have that 10 IP address. I'm going to fix that so that I can use it as my host and then connect it using that IP address. And the controller NIC will have a name controller -NIC. And if you see over here that client VM private IP address will have a private IP address 15. That's the client VM, which you have seen, which can connect to the public internet, right? So you'll have a public IP address, but we'll also fix that IP address so that it is not overlapping with the other IP addresses. And the client VM will have a public IP address, a network interface, and then we'll also use a couple of worker nodes. In this, we'll be creating 2 worker nodes, but you can have many more worker nodes. So worker node will have, let's say, will start from the number 2. So the first one will be 20, second one will be 21, so on and so forth. So we are basically giving some gaps in between so that they don't overlap. We are also using another best practices that is availability set for all the worker VM. So worker VM will put into availability set that will make sure that any planned downtime maintenance is not shutting down all the worker nodes. So they will be down one at a time. And then the admin user will have a name called CKA, and then it should ask me for the password. So we are not providing the password hard-coded here. Rather, I will ask for the password, and when that is being asked, I will type it out in a silent prompt, and then it will give me that option. Now, if you see here, the client VM will have a name, CKA client. Controller VM will have a name, let's say controller VM. And if you go a little down, first thing will here is what we will start creating the um, the actual resources. First, we'll create the resource group, and then the script will trigger creating a couple of things. That one of the things is that the storage account is gonna go ahead and create a storage account, so you can use this storage account uh, creation script, which will make sure that storage account is created, right? Now, one of the things is that if you explicitly mention the storage account name over here on top, right? It's highly possible that this storage account name is occupied. Now, if you use a storage account down here with that name, and if the name exists, this will give you an error. Now, what we are doing is that we are not creating the storage account. Rather, we are even not using the storage account name. So that's not relevant anymore, which is on top. So that is this one. So if we hide this line number 3 and then put it something like this, it's gone. Now you can see that storage account name is no more relevant. And I'll tell you why this is not relevant, because if you come little down, you'll understand that. Now, this is the line number 55 where we're creating a virtual network. And I have echoed them all in all those steps. So you can see that I'm now going to create a virtual network. That virtual network creation will have, let's say, a resource group. So I'll give a resource group and then a VNet name, and then address prefix. So whatever prefix I have mentioned on top will be used here as an address prefix. If you go a little down, you'll find that it's now going to create a network security group, and it will be creating under the same resource group, give the name of the network security group, which is mentioned on top. Now, over here, it's going to go ahead and add network security group rules, right? So it'll create a rule, which basically I will have a name called allow SSH. This is basically the SSH port. So I'm going to explicitly give that rule a place. So port 22 will be allowed here with priority 1000. And then port 6443 will be allowed in the controller VM for API server to interact with, right? So you can see that these two are inbound port, which means that people from outside can access this controller VM using these ports. Okay, so so sometime you need to reach out to the controller VM for some administrative activity, sending the information about the health and etc. Now this is where I'm actually creating a subnet, right? So this is where I gave the VNet name, subnet name, and the address prefix defined on top, which basically also assigns the network security group to this subnet, that is NSG. Okay, so that subnet will have the NSG added automatically. Now we will create the client VM public IP address, because that's when we need only one public IP address in the whole environment, only one VM, that is client VM, which will be able to connect to the controller and other worker node through SSH, because we need that connectivity to be able to set it up. Instead of we opening it up the controller VM, we open the client VM directly, not allowing the controller VM to reach out, or people from outside cannot access the controller VM directly. Now, we also need a NIC for the client VM. So we'll basically give the name of that. And then we see here, we could provide the public IP address, which should be within that subnet boundary. And then the public IP address, which we just now have created before. So we'll take that to create a NIC. And then the client VM creation process will kickstart. This is an interesting part. So if you notice here, the client VM creation process, we are providing the password and username, right? So admin username, that is this username, and the password is the password, right? So if you notice here, this is the password which was basically created earlier, right? And then we kind of using this admin username and password to provide this thing. And then you can just see that we are not using SSH key. However, we can use SSH key if you wish to. So that both the thing. I feel comfortable using admin username and password, because then I don't have to carry that SSH key in every machine from where I need to connect. so I can do a couple of different ways. Now, this is how the storage account will get created. So the moment you say use unmanaged disk and then you type the storage type, what it will do, it will randomly create a storage account in that resource group if it doesn't find any storage account, right? So we are not providing any name for the storage account, but we are specifying what kind of storage account we need. Now, why we need this storage account is we are using the HDD hard disk, which is cheaper than the managed disk. So because it's a demo environment, to save the cost, we are not using the managed disk. We're using this HDD. That's the disk we are. And then we give something around 200 GB of size to this OS disk size. And we will enable the auto shutdown on the time specified over here. So the time is 12:30 UTC, and you just need to match it with your current time. So that is pretty much my evening. So I'm okay if the whole environment goes down. So you can alter that at a later point in time also. Now, if you see here, we are also using controller VM SNCC. So that's the controller VM part where we are creating a NIC, and then we are only using private IP address, no public IP address is assigned to this NIC, and then it is using the same subnet. So we are not creating different subnet for different activity. We're using one single subnet, but you can have different subnet for, let's say, client VM, a different subnet, controller is a different subnet, worker is a different subnet. You can also design your network like that so that they are kind of well bordered across multiple different subnets, right? And after that, we come little down over here. We see that controller VM pre-creation process matches exactly the same way how the client VM was getting created. Everything same, right? Auto shutdown is same, so there is no change in this step, just the exact same. So we should be using some sort of function like activity to do that. And then if you come little down, then we are now focusing on the worker node. Before we create the worker node, we create an availability set, which will ensure that you have a good number of update domain, fault domain, etc. built into that. Now it runs a loop, right? So it's right now two machines, 0 and 1, and it'll create all of them. It'll first create a NIC with a private IP address, and then it'll create VM with that NIC information, and then it'll basically enable the auto shutdown. That's all it needs. Now let's see whether this works in my environment or not. So I made some changes, so let me just save it. And then if I say sh setup Azure sh, it's gonna go ahead and start creating all the things. So you will find that this is basically not creating the storage account because we just opted out creating the storage account just to be on the safer side. And it will have the storage, the resource group created RGCKA. So if we go into the Azure portal, you will find all these resources getting created within that. So if you come over here in my resource group, and if I just refresh it, and you will find that RGCKA is created, and inside that just a VNet got created, and you will find inside that VNet address space, the address space, you can see that overlaps with the address space of the virtual network CKA VNet. Virtual network overlapping address space cannot be peered, right? So you can actually change the address space. So there is no problem. So we have got 256, so we are not going to peer them all. So that's okay. So we are basically having the address space, which is private anyways at the end of the day. So you're not going to create anything like that. So let's just go into that and say refresh. And you'll find that the NSG is now up here with like K8 allow SSH 22 port, API server 6443, and then so on and so forth. So if you go back again and refresh, you might find a couple of more things coming up once they are done. So if you notice here at this point in time, right, it is now going to create the, it has created a public IP address. it has created a subnet. It has created a couple of things, right? So NSG, and then it has created a virtual network. So you can see that we have got all of them. So we have got NSG, public IP address, subnet, etc., created and getting created. So this will take some time. So we'll let this work going on, right? So okay, so let me just keep it happening. Now let me just quickly see that VM setup. Azure. I'm just going to check it out a couple of things so we can actually go. Let me just quickly check. So this is so this is where it should be. So access allow, create an NSG, create a virtual network. That's fine. Create the subnet. The virtual machine did not get created. So we'll have to find what is the problem. So you say that admin username password. Yeah, so this basically did not work. So admin user, admin password. So it never prompted me for the admin password. That's the reason the VMs are not created. That's okay. So we'll hardcode the password. Okay. So we will hardcode the password and run the script again so that things which are missed out will be created. But let this run through that all the thing, right? So you can see that admin password is missing over here. So we'll pass that admin password some value and try to create it. Now you can see that it's gonna go ahead and create all this kind of worker node VM and auto provisioning shutdown and all this stuff. So let this happen one by one. Okay. So while this is happening, what I'm gonna do is that I'm gonna go ahead and modify this. I'll say setup Azure, and then I take this admin password. Okay. So instead of me calling out this prompt kind of thing, what I'm gonna do is that I'm gonna say that let me now use this. Let me use this admin pwd and give some password. Now super secret 1 2 3 4. Okay, so it should be 12 character long. So let me just should be 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9 10 11. So should be okay right now at this point in time. So now you can see that I have got my 12 character long password with at least one capital, one small, one letter, one special character. So let me save it out and see the other tab where it is running. Should have the same problem, right? So it will not be able to create the VM for the worker node Nick. So we'll just let this whole process finish. This will create a problem in that, and then it'll also create the problem in the VM. So it's done. Now I'm going to run the same command, which is this one with the modification. So that there'll be no resource group, new resource group created. because the resource group is already available. There'll be no new virtual network created because it's already there, right? And then it'll basically go ahead and create an NSG, and then it will have this use leverage the same thing, right? And once this is all done, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to quickly check my Azure resource group. So let me quickly check it out. Now you can see that you have got client Nick, client Pip, and everything ready, right? So availability set, only the VMs are missing, which we'll handle now, right? It's not gonna impact much over here. So you can see that it's gonna skip things which is already there. For example, the virtual network, it actually came back and then say that it is in used. That means it's already there, and then it cannot change that. So because there is a NIC which is pointing to the subnet of this virtual network. So you might find this kind of challenges, and I want you to experience this and see what exactly is happening so that you can also troubleshoot these errors, right? So you can see that subnet, it's not going to create, it's not going to replace, it's not going to create a new public IP address because that name will have a conflict. So everything will be skipped. Okay. The only thing which will now work is the virtual machine. Now you remember that I kind of have used this super secret password, right? That S capital, and then I have some things. So let me also remember that while I create it. Yeah, so the first VM will be client VM, so it should not now have a problem. Now, once this client VM is created, we will be able to see a VM appearing in our Azure subscription, and then we can actually go ahead and install a couple of things in the client VM while the other things are getting installed. Okay, so we'll just wait for this to happen, and then it will also configure the auto shutdown as usual. Let us see what all additionally it has created. If I just hide this and refresh it, you will see that you have a client NSG, CK the VNet, the client NIC, the controller NIC, the worker NIC. These NICs are important because these NICs will have the NSGs used. So you can see that this NSG is being leveraged within all the NICs, right? So you will see that it is refreshed. So let me just go back and check out the activity over here. Okay, so still working on creating the client VM. So it is done. Now this is the IP address you can see. Now the next step, what it will do, it'll basically go ahead and start enabling the auto shutdown into that. Now while it is enabling the auto shutdown, let us just go ahead and connect to this VM. Now to connect to this VM, what I can do is that I can say SSH CKA, that's the username, and then the IP address, that's a public IP address. Now it's gonna go ahead and ask me whether they want me to add it to the host. I say yes, and then I use my password. So once I am successfully logged in using the correct password, so I'm inside the CKA client. Now, one thing I need here is the kubectl tool. So I'm just letting this whole controller VM and then all other VM, which is going to come up pretty soon, happen while I'm going to install a couple of things. So I'm going to install a few things, and then I will take help uh, from the GitHub repo of mine. So let me go to that GitHub repo, and I think it is here somewhere. So let me just open up CKA setup, and then if I just run the CKA setup and then go to the scripts, let's go to the script now. I'll say that what do you need to run the kubectl command in the client, right? So you just go to this step and then find that. Now, if you're confused about which script to run where, you can always come back to the README documentation and you see that it has got all the things, right? Join the worker node, confirm the setup, some useful CLI commands, etc. Right? What I also did not do is that how to install the kubectl command in the client. So let me open the Kubernetes documentation, and then I'll say tasks, and then install tools, and then I say install tools on Linux, and then let me pick up the binary option, which is how you can install, right? So you can install the kubectl using native package management also. That way, if you take these two command and then paste it into the client and run it, they will basically run the installation. And then once they are done, so you just public signing key, you download that signing key, and then you paste it over here, and it's gonna go ahead and then uh, copy. I triggered the same command, but let me just paste it. It's now there, and just to add it to the apt repository, you just run this, all of them written in the documentation. Don't need to worry about it. It's a default Y, so that's not asking me to for the confirmation, but you just go ahead and get the kubectl installed in your client machine, right? So you just need to see if the kubectl is running. So you say kubectl. Right now we do not have any Kubernetes cluster, right? I just could CDL. Sorry, that's an interesting stuff. So let me just come out of that and then do an SSH again. Let me restart. Okay, so ping. So this is a public IP address, so let's just keep pinging that. I know the local IP address is also something like 10 dot. I cannot reach because it's not in the same network, so I had to use the public IP address. This is 1392.98. So I say ping this. And it's going to tell me like when this is up and running. It should be pretty quick because Ubuntu does server is very fast in terms of rebooting things. So you'll find pretty soon it will start responding. It might also happen that it might get a new public IP address, but never know. So you just wait for that response to come back, and let's see what exactly is happening over here. Is there any problem? Controller VM NIC is created. Okay, it is auto shutdown is enabled. Controller VM, the worker VM is created. It seems like all of them have been created without any trouble. So there was only one issue, which was like the password. So I'll fix that script. I'll put a password, but I'll let you change the password based on your own requirement. So let me just go ahead and see over here, like what we have created so far in this subscription is matching with what we need to do. So let me go back into the subscription page. Okay. All right. Let me go back to this portal.azure.com. Log in again. I think I lost the connectivity of the Azure portal, but let's not worry about it. Let's go ahead and log in. And you should be able to see all the virtual machine, four of them. One is the client machine with a public IP address, and one is controller to our worker, right? So that's the script, what it does. So you don't have to do manual step-by-step thing. It's pretty straightforward and easy to achieve that. Now, if you see over here, the resource group, if I go to the resource group, and then I go to the resource group, which is like CKA, RGCKA, and you see over here at the bottom of this list, you have the virtual machine. So I can say group by kind, type, maybe. And then you can see that I have the virtual machines here. There are four virtual machines, and all of them are okay, looks healthy, fine at this point in time, gonna work perfect. So we have no issue in terms of worrying too much about this virtual machine. Now, let's just go back into this page and start setting things up, right? So one of the things which we can do is that we can note down the virtual machine IP addresses. I remember the virtual machine IP address because I have given them. So let's look into the controller first. So in the controller, you have this IP address called that internal IP address that is 10.230.0.10. If you use this IP address to try to log in from the client VM, right? So this is the client machine, right? I'm right now logged in to the client machine. And let me see what is the if I can still log in using the same thing. Let me, if I just go ahead and then log in, it's logged in. And now if I say SSH CKA and use the private IP address, that is this IP address, okay? And I say yes, that's fine. And then I say this one, and then I'm inside the controller VM. Now that's where I'm going to run few scripts. Now I already have given the script over here. So let me take you to the portal, right? So you go to this README page on top, and then you go down here. We created all the resources in Azure. That step number one is done. And then in the step number two, prepare the virtual machine. And then this is what you need to prepare the client virtual machine. So we haven't done that yet. So we will do that. So let me just look into the script. And then you can see that it has got a couple of things which you need to do in the worker node and the IP table, etc. Right? So you can see that over here, it's gonna go ahead and define the Docker, etc. over here. Now, if you look into this, let's say, list of scripts in the bottom, where I have the script August 21st, uh, all node setup and the master setup. So there are two different things. So if you look into the master setup, it basically talks about getting the kubeadm join command. Okay, that's the only thing you don't do. But all the node requires certain specific things like the IP table, etc. All of them, right? So you can copy the whole thing and create a VI editor, or you can just say go to the raw. That's what you get the whole path of the file, and come back into this thing, and then say wget URL -o setup.sh. If you do that, you get that, and then say setup .sh. It's going to go ahead and trigger the installation process within the controller VM. Okay, so the controller VM is pretty much working fine. Now, while it is happening, what I can do, I can also log in another thing. Let me get the client VM IP address from my thing, and then client pip. This is the client VM public IP address. I copy this, and then I go and say SSH CKA, and then provide this, and it will ask me the password. So this password is getting entered, and then I will also log into my client VM. Now client VM's IP address starts with 10.230.0.20. Okay, but just to confirm. Okay, so let me go back into this, go into this virtual machines which got created. Let me refresh that. Go here, and you have that worker 0 and worker 1. So worker 0 is the first machine, which is having 20. Okay, so you'll find that this is the IP address. So I can use this IP address to reach out to this worker VM, right? So if I say that, and then if I say yes, and I provide the password and login, it's going to go ahead and log into the worker number 0. So let's set up worker number 0. So we'll use wget and the URL -o, capital O, setup.sh. So you can also directly download it. That's not a problem. So whichever way is comfortable, you can do that. So let me copy the URL from this thing, and then I go on top, go to this one, copy all node setup, go to the raw, copy the URL, come back into my this thing, provide the URL, and then you get it. So if you say sh setup sh, it's going to start installing in the worker VM. So now I have got one controller VM which is installed, right, with all the steps like which I followed from the Kubernetes documentation. In the scripts, there are steps defined, so I can walk you through the steps quickly, pretty quickly over here. So if you see here over here, like say setup.sh, and you see over here, it basically starts checking the IP table, right? And then it also set up the Docker runtime, right? And then update the Docker components you need, and then it will install the Docker CLI, right? Docker daemon, and then it will install the Kubernetes components like kubeadm, kubelet, and kubectl. Okay, all of them will be installed. So all of these steps are defined, well documented in the Kubernetes documentation. So I've just picked up from there and tested, and were able to create. So now in the controller VM, you need additional step. What is this step? So if you go back to this GitHub and then go to the script folder, you see that second one is the master setup. So master setup is where you need to provide the kubeadm init command. Now, if you do that kubeadm init command and tell the API server IP address, which is the controller IP address, then you will find a couple of things. So let's just run this over here and then run it. Now you can see that it is requiring sudo kubeadm, and it says the number of available CPU is the less than required, that is number 2. If you want to make a fatal, ignore. So you need more CPU. So what I can do, probably I can go into this Azure portal and increase the CPU power. So let's just do that. So if we go over here into the Azure portal, now these are the small checks you need to make sure that whatever size you are setting up is the right size. So we'll go to the CKA, go to this controller VM, and see the VM size, it has only one vCPU. That's not enough. So I'll just go to the size. I can resize it here. You can also run command to resize it here. So I'll go and say that let's have this higher size of DS3, which has 4 core, 14 gigabyte of RAM. So I'll say that yes. That's going to go ahead and increase the capacity. So you need more core in the controller. So it's resizing means it'll reboot, and then you will find that your bash will actually lose the connectivity, right? So you can see that the connection is closed. That's okay. So we can always come back. But what I wanted to also do is that I'm also going to change the host file. So if I say cat etc hosts, we'll find a couple of entries here. I'm going to add a few things here. So I'll say sudo vim /etc/hosts. If I go ahead and then go and add a few things here, let's say I say 10.2 10.230.0.10 is my controller. Okay, 10.230.0.20 is my worker 0. Okay, 10.230.0.21 is my worker 1. Okay, so I just added them here. Now let me come back and then save it. And what I can now do is that once this is up and running, so I can say ping 10.230.0.10, that is my controller VM. And you can see that it's responding. That means it is up now. And what it means that I can go and say SSH CKA. I no more need that IP address. So I can say controller, and it's gonna go ahead and add it to that. So I log in, and then I am inside the controller. Now I can pretty much run the command I was trying to run earlier. So let us just go back and let's say bring back the script folder, go to this master node setup, copy this URL setup. I can also download the script and run it, but let's just try here. Now that's gonna initiate the Cube ADM setup. Okay, that's critical. If it fails, nothing will work. So if you need to make sure that whatever you provide works exactly the fine. So it is now having 4 CPU, right? 14 gigabyte of RAM in the controller. So controller needs to have the minimum, let's say 2 core machine. But if you want to bypass them and then still uninstall, you can also pass. So I didn't want to do that. So I just went ahead and did this thing. So let this happen. While what we can do, we can go back into this worker node and see if things are working fine. So let's say Docker, it's running, Docker ps sudo Docker ps. That's fine, all running. So things are fine. So my controller is ready, my worker is ready. So I can come out of this worker 0 and log into worker 1. Okay, and now this time I can say CKA worker 1, and it will just log in. Now that's the beauty, right? You can see that I now am in that. So I'll say wget, whatever the URL is, 0, and say setup.sh. Okay, so that URL, I will pick it up from my GitHub, and I just go ahead and say, I want to go to this, all node setup, go to the raw, pick up the URL, come back into the script folder so that I don't have to switch to that again. Okay, so I set that up and then get it downloaded. sh set up sh, done. I don't do anything. So it's tested a couple of times until unless anything changes dramatically, it should work, right? So you can see that the controller VM now gives me a kubeadm join command. Need to copy this. Now this is done. The controller VM setup is done. Now what I have received here is a join command. This is what I need to run in the worker node. Okay, so the worker node is running, right? This is done, so I can come out of this and connect to the worker 0, which is already done. So I'll say SSH CKA worker 0. If I do that and I say yes, I log in using the password, and then I go inside that worker 0, run the command copied after this kubeadm command is installed, right? So you can see that it is requiring a privileged user. So let's use sudo before this command, right? So that's what the error is telling. So if you say sudo kubeadm, and it's gonna go ahead and then create that. Now, this is just the same process for worker 1 as well. So once the worker 1 is kind of up and running, we should be able to do that. Now let's just come out of this and say come here. What another thing, this is right now in the client, right? What I'm going to do is that I'm going to log into the controller. So I go to the controller, I say I say that password, and then I log in. The controller VM is there. Now there is one more setup which I have demonstrated over here. So you can say that. Let's go to this, not here. Let's go to this previous page, and I go to this home. And then if you notice here at the bottom, right, where I have a master node setup, there is something you need to do once this master node is done. You need to copy this kube config folder, right? So let's follow this step by step. So we copy this mkdir, copy it, okay? Copy the second command. So it's basically copying this admin config to my home directory under kube config, and then I am going to give the rights to the user. Okay, so that's the step which is happening at this point in time. And then once this is join command is done, right? You need to use that kubectl network plugin. Now, what is this network plugin really is? It is the Kubernetes networking. Okay, so let me also run it. Once this kubectl is kind of configured, then only you can run it. Okay, so you just need to see beforehand kubectl if it is working. Kubectl. You can see that it is working. Kubectl get nodes. You can see that not ready, not ready. This takes some time, but it is now identified what is worker 0 and worker 1. Now let's see if the worker 1 is kind of ready. It is now ready. Now what we can do, we can copy this join command, okay, and then run it over here. Once I copy this join command and run it, it definitely needs the sudo, that is super user. So sudo requires here, so I type the sudo, it's gonna go ahead and then add that. Now while all of them are getting added, I can just check out the nodes in watch mode. You can see that third node is kind of getting added to the cluster while the other two like controller and worker is now ready. Now I'm pretty much done with setting up the whole Kubernetes cluster within an hour. It's right now 54 minutes. We had some uh, issues in between with the VM sizes, etc. But having said that, it's because of the script we can make it happen so quickly, right? Otherwise, it is very difficult to do all these things. So what you can do now all the workers are kind of ready. So what you can do now, you can try checking by deploying some work. So let's say cube. So let's use the alias k kubectl k get pods. Right now I don't have any pods, but if I use this all namespaces, you see some default pods are available. K create deploy nginx image nginx. Nginx is created. K get pods. You will have that randomly created pod. So the pod is getting created. So you can see that it's gonna go ahead and then show you once this pod is up and running. So the pod is running now because the container download happened, and then it is just doing fine. So my Kubernetes cluster is ready with one controller node, two worker node, one client VM. Now, if you are working on the other client VM, right? So what you can do, you can just uh, copy the kubectl command to the client machine, right? So for example, if you see over here, the client IP address. Let me pick it up from here in the CKA, go to this client, and if I go ahead and copy this and I keep it running in my notepad, that's here. And then what I'm going to do is that I'm going to SSH into this with CKA. So let's just keep it ready. And then what I'm going to do is that I'm going to run this copy command to copy the kube ctl command. So let me just kube config. Let me quickly open it up from here. Okay, so if you go a little up, you see that what it is essentially doing is that it is essentially copying this file to it's essentially copying this admin folder to this folder, which you can do, right? So you can actually go to the client machine and follow the setup, right? Confirm the setup. You can just run this mk directory. So let me just log into this client machine. So let's just do one by one. I copy this SSH command, go to my this thing, and I log in using this. Once I log in here, right, what I need to do is that I need to follow the instruction given here. So the instruction says that you copy this directory and you create a directory like this. And then inside the directory, you copy the config, right? A go master to the client. So what I need to do is that we need to go to this master and then copy the home and then Kubernetes config from there. So let's just go into the control plane. So what we can do is that SSH CKA controller, and then I just say login now, login, okay, and then I use secure file copy, and then I say CKA at the rate whatever that client IP address is, that's a public IP address. Let's copy that and paste it. Uh, wrong paste. So let me go back and copy. So it logs in there, and then it takes two more argument, right? This folder file, right, will be copied Let's see if we config. Hmm. So there is a space. That's the problem. So let me just go ahead and remove the space from here and say yes. And then password. So it's gonna go copy this local config to my client config. Now, if I exit, it's gonna go to the client config, kubectl. Mhm. kubectl is not properly configured, obviously. That's the reason it is failing. So let's just use this worker node setup to get the kubectl up and running over here. But we will fix it and we'll have a detailed description about how to install the kubectl. But let us just copy the command from the CKA setup. Go to that. You go to this worker, new worker, Azure cluster setup. It should actually copy the thing, right? wget, not in worker, but in client. wget URL dash o setup to dot sh. Okay, sh setup to dot sh. So let me see what is missing over here. Mhm. So it's a wrong file. So I took a wrong URL. So I should be taking the raw URL, not this one. So let me hide this, replace this wget, and then I say that setup 3 maybe, and then sh setup 3 .sh should actually handle the kubectl installation. So this is already tested script, which has got step-by-step things, and that also includes the kubectl installation process. So you'll find that pretty quickly. This is unnecessarily using Docker, etc. I don't need them, but just the kubectl. Okay. So we will fix that. We will have a special instruction given here how to install only kubectl and then copy the command. So this is one thing I just need to add to the document, so which is also a nice little find here that now we should be able to run things. But anyways, the controller is able to show things up. So this is exactly I wanted to set it up in the client where the client will also have the um, kubectl view once this is configured and installed on this machine, right? So you can see that it is now doing a couple of Kubernetes specific thing, which is absolutely not required. Just the kubectl should be fine. So we could actually remove the steps which are not required here, but let's just have this installed properly over here. kubeadm, etc. is definitely not required. One moment, it should be done. Now you have a worker node running. That worker node is connected to the Kubernetes control plane, And if you see over here, if you say k get pods minus o wide, that'll tell you that which worker node it is running right now. It is running in worker node 2. If you replicas equal to 10, it'll be spread across create Kubernetes, create deploy nginx 2 image nginx replicas. I don't know, something might have been happening, so we'll not look into that. But let's just quickly see kubectl should be running now, and then kubectl get nodes should get you the nodes, and this is the Kubernetes. So this is the client machine, which is now able to talk to the Kubernetes API, fetch you all the information, just like Kubernetes control plane. So this has a public IP address, so you should be connecting to the client machine and then reaching out to the Kubernetes API using the kubectl command. So with this, I want to end, and then we could finish it in 1 hour, 6 minutes exactly, with little bit of friction, but it should can be done within an hour if you have all the script tested and checked properly. With this, thank you very much and have a wonderful day.